What has been your favorite thing about being the district attorney so far?
And it's a very powerful position, and I get to set criminal justice policy basically for the county of Dallas. And so that really is what I love doing. I have about 250 prosecutors that work for me, and a support staff of about 250. So you see DAs and the elected DA, everyone would think that they spend a lot of time in the courtroom, but that's not the case. I spend most of my time dealing with administrative issues and policy issues, and come to Austin a lot for that.
Well, that's good. So when you say policy issues, you also mean decisions about what types of people how they need to be treated in the system?
Absolutely. Our first 3 years, and really our first term, was just to correct the way in which we investigated cases and those types of procedures. Now, in the next 4 years, we plan on transitioning and have a broader approach as it relates to criminal justice reform. What I've seen, even as a private citizen, is that we are not getting a return on our investment. And what I mean by that is taxpayers. We pay money into the system, especially the criminal justice system, and we're not getting a return on that investment. Most criminals or individuals that commit crimes are the ones that continue to go through the system. There's a high recidivism rate, and we spend roughly $40 per day to house an inmate. And in Texas, we only spend about $8 a day to educate our children. And so at some point we have to, question the significance of what we're doing, and the fact that all this money is just going down a black hole and we're not getting a return. These individuals that are convicted rightfully of a crime, they continue to keep going back to prison and continue to keep making victims. And so at some point we have to put policies in place that will address those issues which cause individuals to commit crimes. And the penal institution should be in a position to do that. Right now we're just housing people and letting them out. They come in with a certain condition. They spend 5 or 6 years, and that condition is not addressed. And so when they get out, they still have that condition. On top of that, they're an ex-felon. And so what do you expect to have returning to your neighborhoods? The same thing, and even worse than what left. And so at some point, in order for adequate public safety to work, we have to have some real serious reforms put in place. We've created a whole subculture, and I think traditional law enforcement, they don't understand this, is that in some communities, going to prison is a rite of passage. Because we've sent so many people from that group into prison, so it's something to be expected, and it's kind of a badge of honor. And so you've gotten certain individuals that have adapted to the way the government has dispensed justice, and that adaptation lends us to have more folks that commit crimes. And so we need to change
that's
the
interesting.
policy and get away from just wholeheartedly sending folks to jail, and focus more on making these individuals productive.
You talked about people who have the drug problem, and I think last time I looked, I think Texas prison may have, it's half or more, maybe 70% of the people in there are there for drug crimes. And you could argue that that's a violent crime, but you could also see that that's sometimes a victimless possession crime by a user. A lot of those people are just using, they're really not in the sale trade of drugs. Do you think we should treat our drug users any differently than we are right now in Texas?
Obviously, I think we've been complicit in the fact that we have criminalized all of these individuals that may have an addiction. Now, in some cases, they do need to be incarcerated because that addiction leads to criminal activity. Stealing someone's TV or VCR to feed that habit. But unfortunately, we're not coupling rehabilitation with the punishment side of our penal system. And our penal system at this point is just based on punishment. And until we have aspects of rehabilitation, we're going to keep getting the same thing that we've gotten in the past, and that recidivism rate, high drug usage, and individuals that at some point, because of their addiction, may end up committing a violent crime and hurting someone. And so until our philosophy is being smart on crime, until we get away from the tough mentality and start to be smart on crime, then we will always spin our wheels and have this as an issue. And a lot of our tax dollars are going for that cause when they could be used for something more productive.
Well, you're going to be one to watch in the next few years as you implement some of these thoughts and put them into practice. What has been your biggest challenge as the district attorney in the last 4 years or 3 years?
The biggest challenge is getting, I am just one individual in this wheel, this wheel and trying to improve things. The biggest challenge is dealing with other elected officials, especially in my local jurisdiction, who don't quite understand the approach that we're bringing. We are faced with tough economic times from the government level. Our tax dollars are lower because less people are working, and property values have gone down. So that means that there are less resources for us to implement some of these progressive ideas. And so the difficulty is for those individuals that are in positions to make decisions about how they're going to spend those tax dollars, don't see the benefit of investing at this point, and realize that the investment may take some years before you see the benefits of it. So that's what's most difficult. A lot of the folks have to get elected, and so politics will play a large part in their decision making on tax dollars and how they will be used. But unfortunately, at some point, we're going to be called to the carpet on how we've used our tax dollars, and until that happens, I think we'll continue down this road of misusing them and not using them for the benefit of the citizens we've been elected to represent.
Now, if I'm a person watching this video sitting in my comfy living room in Texas, what can I do to support your ideas? What can I do to try to help make sure that my tax dollars are spent in the best way possible?
The best way to do it, and I know this sounds simple, but it's so important, is really to pay attention to the process and then exercise your right to vote. Because I wouldn't be here if it weren't for folks voting for me. And I think it takes an informed electorate to make sure they put people in places that will really advocate for what's important, what will lead their state or their county or their city in the direction that it needs to go.
That's a great piece of advice. I guess it isn't said, for my taste, it's not said enough, but I want our audience to know, you're the first African-American district attorney in the state of Texas in all history. Isn't that true?
That's true. Unfortunately, 2006 was the first African-American elected DA, and I don't think that's something that we should be proud of.
I'm certainly not proud of it, but to neglect to mention it, I think, is really something big that's missing. And I realize sometimes it's not mentioned around you, and maybe you don't want to be seen as, one label. But I just think it's a beautiful thing that you're an historical figure in Texas, and it's an honor to sit with you.
Thank you.
I want to know if you have a message you'd like to get out to the young adults in Texas. A lot of young people right now aren't even voting. You've talked about voting. Do you have anything you want to tell young people in Texas?
Well, the young folks in Texas, you have an opportunity. At some point, you're going to be paying taxes, you're going to raise families, and you're going to be working for a living. And so you want your government to be responsive to your needs. And until you become part of the process, then it won't be. Your generation is the one that will keep this country moving forward. So young people, you have a great responsibility, and us that are middle age are counting on you. So we will have what we need when it's time for us to sit down, and you take control of this.
That's just beautiful. Thank you so much for your time today, Mr. District Attorney, and we're wishing you all the best in your future years in your office.
All right, thank you.